He lay perfectly still on the velvet sofa, breath measured, eyes closed, every muscle trained to betray nothing, because years of boardrooms and billion-dollar negotiations had taught him how to vanish behind silence, and tonight that silence was a test he told himself was harmless, even necessary, a way to understand the quiet young maid who moved through his mansion like a shadow, never asking for more, never looking anyone in the eye, yet somehow keeping the vast house warmer than any of the art or gold that filled it. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows, painting the room in honeyed light as she entered with careful steps, hands clasped, believing him asleep after a long illness, and for the first time since she arrived months ago he allowed himself to simply watch without being seen, curious whether kindness remained when power was absent, and at first she only tidied, straightening a cushion, smoothing the throw, moving with a gentleness that spoke of someone used to making herself small. Then she paused by the table where unpaid bills and loose cash lay in a careless pile he had left intentionally, a temptation disguised as negligence, and he felt a cynical satisfaction tighten his chest, certain he knew how this would end, because wealth had taught him that tests always revealed greed, but what followed froze him more completely than any market crash ever had. As she counted the money not with hunger but with worry, lips moving silently, eyes shining with concern, and instead of pocketing even a single bill she reached into her apron and added a few worn notes of her own, smoothing them into the stack as if embarrassed by the smallness of the gift, whispering an apology to the empty room for not being able to do more, and in that instant the lie he lived, of control, of superiority, of knowing people, cracked wide open, because no one had ever given him money without wanting something back, and here was someone with nothing giving anyway. And the room seemed to breathe around him as she turned toward the large leather-bound book on the table, opening it reverently to reveal it wasn't a ledger at all but a childhood journal he had forgotten existed, pages filled with uneven handwriting from a boy who once believed goodness was simple, and she read a line, smiled sadly, and murmured how brave he must have been to dream so big, then replaced the book exactly as she found it, unaware that the man she thought asleep was listening to every word like a confession meant only for him. And when she moved to the sofa her voice softened further, telling him she hoped he felt better, that she prayed for him even though she wasn't sure prayers worked for people as powerful as he was, because power often closed its ears, and she adjusted the blanket over his chest with the tenderness of family, not employee, before stepping back to leave, and that was when he felt it, the sharp, unwelcome sting behind his eyes, as the realization struck that he had built an empire and lost the ability to be seen, and this shy maid, with her careful steps and quiet courage, had seen him anyway, not the CEO, not the fortune, but the tired human beneath, and the test he designed to expose her had instead exposed himself, a man rich in assets and poor in trust. And as the door closed softly behind her he made a decision more frightening than any hostile takeover, because changing a company was easy, but changing a life required humility, and when he finally woke, calling her back with a hoarse voice, the surprise on her face was genuine, fear flickering as she worried she had done something wrong, and he struggled to find words that did not sound like authority, thanking her simply, asking her to sit, admitting he had pretended to sleep, not as an accusation but a confession, and he watched her brace for punishment that never came, instead receiving an apology from a man who had never apologized to anyone below the boardroom, and in that conversation, awkward, halting, honest, the mansion felt smaller, warmer, more real, as he asked about her life and listened without interrupting, learning about sacrifices, about sending money home, about dreams deferred but not abandoned, and he realized that leadership without empathy was just noise, wealth without purpose just weight, and trust once broken by suspicion could only be rebuilt by truth. And when he offered her a promotion she hesitated, not out of fear but integrity, asking if it was because she passed his test, and he answered that there would be no more tests, only respect, and as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows, a new chapter began not of romance or fairy tales but of dignity, where a rich CEO learned that the bravest courage was kindness without witnesses, and the shy maid taught him that true power is what you do when no one is watching, and if this story moved you, if you believe quiet goodness deserves to be seen, subscribe to the channel, because every story you watch helps us tell another one that reminds the world empathy still matters.